Two identical balls, same height, same instant. This red one I simply let go, it drops straight down. This blue one I fire hard, sideways. Here's my question before we start, which one hits the ground first? Most people bet on the dropped ball, less distance to cover, surely it wins. But watch the gold line between them, it stays perfectly level the whole way down. A dead heat. They land at exactly the same moment. That horizontal kick the blue ball had did nothing to its fall. The sideways motion and the downward motion simply ignore each other. That single idea is the key that unlocks this entire chapter. Welcome to Motion in 2 and 3 Dimensions. Motion in 2 and 3 Dimensions. In Chapter 2, everything moved along one straight line. Now the path is free to curve, a jet banking through a turn, a basketball arcing to the hoop, a plane drifting in a crosswind. The physics is exactly what you already know. The one new tool is the language of vectors, direction, built right into every quantity. Let's lay down a field to play on. Here's our field, a flat xy plane. To pin down where a particle is, we draw an arrow from the origin straight out to it. That arrow is the position vector r. Its components are simply the particle's coordinates. In full three-dimensional form, r equals xi hat plus yj hat plus zk hat. The unit vectors I, j and k just label the three directions, the numbers x, y and z do the locating. Now let the particle move to a new spot, position vector r2. The change in position, the straight arrow from the old point to the new, is the displacement, delta r, final position vector minus the initial one. And here's the quiet power of vectors, that one arrow equation works axis by axis automatically. The x change, the y change, the z change handled all at once. Every idea from here on is built on this single picture. A particle traces some curving path across the field. Average velocity is displacement over time, a vector pointing the same way as delta r. Shrink the time interval to an instant, and you get the instantaneous velocity. Velocity is the derivative of position, v equals dr dt. And there is one fact about it worth tattooing on your memory. No matter how the path bends, the velocity arrow always points tangent to the curve, straight along the direction of travel at that instant. Watch it sweep through every twist without ever leaving the path. Unlike the position vector, the velocity arrow doesn't reach from here to there. It just sits on the particle, showing where it's headed right now. Tangent always. Remember that, and half of 2D kinematics is intuition. When velocity changes, in size, in direction, or in both, the particle is accelerating. Average acceleration is the change in velocity over time, the instantaneous version is its derivative, component by component. Now here's the subtle trap that 2D motion springs on you. Picture a car rounding a bend at a perfectly steady speed. The speedometer never moves. And yet it is accelerating hard. Because velocity is a vector, and its direction is swinging around every second. A change in direction alone, with no change in speed at all, is still an acceleration. That's exactly what makes circular motion so interesting, and we'll come back to it. But first, the showpiece of the chapter, projectile motion. A projectile is anything launched and then left to gravity alone, a thrown ball, a struck golf ball, a cannonball. No engine, Just one constant downward acceleration, g. Its path is this graceful arc. Here is the master trick. Instead of fighting one curved problem, we cast two shadows. One onto the floor, the horizontal motion. One onto the wall, the vertical motion. Watch them as the ball flies. Now look at the spacing of the shadows at equal time steps. Along the floor, perfectly even. The horizontal motion runs at constant velocity, no acceleration ever. Up the wall, the marks bunch near the top and spread near the bottom. That's free fall, speeding up under gravity. So we split the launch velocity once, at the start. V naught cosine theta feeds the horizontal motion, V naught sine theta feeds the vertical. Two easy 1D problems, solved separately, then recombined. That is the whole method. Let's use it. A rescue plane flies horizontally at 55 meters per second, 500 meters up, and releases a capsule. When does it hit the water, and how far ahead does it land? Vertical first. It starts with 0 vertical speed, so 500 equals half gt squared, that gives about 10.1 seconds in the air. Then the horizontal shadow, moving at a steady 55, covers 55 times 10.1, about 555 meters. So the capsule keeps the plane's forward speed the entire way down and lands roughly 555 meters ahead, directly beneath the plane. Split it, solve it, recombine it. Let's collect the equations. Horizontal position grows steadily with time. Vertical position is launch speed times time minus the free fall term. Eliminate the time between them, and you get y as a function of x, and it is a parabola. Every projectile flies a parabola. The horizontal distance back to launch height is the range. Fire from the same speed at different angles, and you sweep out a family of arcs. The range follows a clean formula, V naught squared over g, times the sine of twice the launch angle. Since the sine maxes out at 1 when its angle is 90 degrees, the range is largest when twice theta is 90, that is, a launch angle of 45 degrees. The golden arc reaches farthest. And here's the cannonball lesson. To hit a ship 560 meters away, solving the range equation gives not one answer but two, a low, flat, fast shot at 27 degrees, and a high, lofted shot at 63. Both land in exactly the same place. Two cautions before you trust the formula. It only holds when launch and landing heights are equal. For a basketball or a shot put, 45 degrees is no longer optimal. And it assumes no air. A real fly ball falls well short of the vacuum prediction. A particle going around a circle at constant speed is in uniform circular motion. The speed never changes, but the direction of the velocity changes constantly. So there must be an acceleration. The question is, which way does it point? Here's the answer, and it surprises everyone the first time. The acceleration points straight at the center. We call it centripetal, center-seeking. Velocity tangent, acceleration inward, forever chasing the middle but never reaching it. Two formulas capture it. The centripetal acceleration is v squared over r. Bigger speed or tighter circle means harder turning. And the period, the time for one full loop, is the circumference to pi r divided by the speed. A jet enters a flat circular turn, and 24 seconds later its velocity has exactly reversed. A reversed velocity means it swept half a circle, So a full period is 48 seconds. Its constant speed is the magnitude of that velocity, about 640 meters per second. Combining A equals V squared over R with the period formula gives A equals to pi V over T, about 84 meters per second squared, or 8.6 g. That's well past the 4G where pilots grey out, a recipe for G-induced loss of consciousness. Velocity depends entirely on who is watching. A duck flying north at 30 looks frozen to a duck flying alongside it. The frame you measure against, usually the ground, is your reference frame. To translate a particle's velocity between two frames, you chain the subscripts. P relative to A equals P relative to B, plus B relative to A. See how the inner subscripts match and cancel, leaving P to A on both sides. It's a vector equation, so it works axis by axis. Let's fly a plane through a crosswind with it. The plane's airspeed is 215, its velocity relative to the wind. The wind blows at 65-20 degrees east of north. To end up tracking due east over the ground, the pilot must aim the nose a little into the wind. Lay the vectors tip to tail. Plane relative to wind, then wind relative to ground. Their sum is the velocity over the ground, and we demand it point straight east, with 0 north-south component. Setting the north-south part to 0 fixes the aim, about 16.5 degrees south of east. Add up the eastward parts, and the ground speed comes out near 228 km per hour. The nose points one way, the plane tracks another. One beautiful invariant closes the chapter. Because the relative velocity between frames is constant, its derivative is 0, so all such observers, however much they disagree about velocity, measure the very same acceleration. So, the whole chapter on one field. Position and displacement are vectors. Velocity is the derivative of position and always tangent to the path. Acceleration is the derivative of velocity. Projectile motion splits into an independent horizontal and vertical piece. The path is a parabola, ranging farthest at 45 degrees. Circular motion accelerates inward. And relative velocities chain by their subscripts. If you carry one habit out of this chapter, make it this rhythm. Split the vector into components. Solve each component as a simple 1D problem. Then recombine. Split, solve, recombine. It works for projectiles, for circles, for relative motion, for everything ahead. We've described how things move through space. Next comes the deeper question, what makes them move that way? Forces. That's chapter 5. If this made 2D motion click, subscribe, and I'll see you there.